Commander Jake Harrison was drinking his morning coffee when every screen in the communications bay lit up red. He nearly dropped his cup as alarms started ringing. Throughout the orbital defense station Terra Prime, the young officer had been working the night shift for 3 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. "What's going on?" Jake shouted over the noise to his partner, Lieutenant Sam Kelly, who was frantically typing at his computer. "Something just broke through all our security systems," Sam replied, his voice shaking. "This signal is coming from outside our solar system." Way outside, Jake set down his coffee and ran to the main console. The readings didn't make sense. The signal was coming from 47 light-years away from the Kepler system. But that was impossible. No human technology could send messages that far. Then the voice came through the speakers. It was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. The words were in English, but the accent was strange, almost musical. The speaker sounded terrified. "Earth humans, please hear us. This is Ambassador Kale of the Zephyrian Alliance. We need your help. The Devourers have come to our worlds. They are destroying everything. We cannot stop them." Jake felt his blood turn cold. The Zephyrians were the first alien race humans had ever contacted. 2 years ago, they had sent Earth a peaceful message, introducing themselves. Since then, there had been only friendly conversations about science and culture. Now this Kale sounded like he was dying. The voice continued, breaking up with static. "We intercepted their communications. Earth is their next target. You have maybe 6 months before they reach your system. Please help us fight them. Together we might save both our peoples." Sam was recording everything while Jake opened a direct line to Earth Command. This was way above his level. Within minutes, General Lisa Carter was on the screen from her office. "In Colorado." "Commander Harrison, are you certain this transmission is real?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. The signal is definitely coming from the Kepler system. The voice matches Ambassador Kale's patterns from our previous contacts." General Carter looked grim. "Keep recording. Send everything directly to President Brooks. This is now a matter of planetary security." For the next hour, the Zephyrian transmission continued. Ambassador Kale sent technical data about the enemy. The Devourers were not living creatures, but machines. They had already destroyed 17 different civilizations across the galaxy. They consumed everything on a planet, metals, organic matter, even the atmosphere, and turned it all into fuel for more machines. Dr. Ben Clark, the station's science officer, helped translate the technical information. The pictures that came through made everyone sick. The Devourers left nothing behind but dead, empty rocks where planets used to be. They were like a plague of metal locusts eating their way across the galaxy. "The Zephyrian Alliance has 5 worlds," Dr. Clark explained. To Jake and Sam, 3 of them have already fallen. The remaining 2 won't last much longer. Jake stared at the data streaming across his screen. "How powerful are these Devourers?" "From what I can tell, each of their big ships is the size of a city. They have thousands of smaller attack craft, and they don't seem to feel pain or fear like living things do." Sam looked up from his console. "Why would they want to attack Earth? We're just one small planet." Dr. Clark pulled up a map of the galaxy. "Because we're in their path. They don't attack planets for revenge or politics. They just consume everything they find as they move through space. We're next on their list." 3 hours after the first transmission, President Nathan Brooks was in the emergency bunker beneath Washington, D.C. The Situation Room was packed with military leaders, scientists, and government officials. Everyone looked scared. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the front of the room. She was 55 years old and had commanded Space Forces for over a decade. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her blue eyes were sharp with determination. "Mr. President," she said, "we have 2 choices. We can prepare Earth's defenses and hope we can stop the Devourers when they arrive. Or we can send a fleet to help the Zephyrians and try to stop the enemy there." Secretary of Defense Mike Johnson shook his head. "Admiral, we've never fought a real space war. Our ships are designed for defending Earth, not traveling to other star systems." "That's exactly why we need to go," Admiral Sullivan replied. "If we fight them here at Earth and we lose, then humanity is finished. If we fight them at Kepler and lose, at least Earth has time to prepare better defenses." President Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Everyone in the room watched him think. Finally he spoke. "How many ships can we send?" Admiral Sullivan had been preparing for this question. "I can put together a fleet of 37 ships. Our biggest battleships, fastest cruisers, and best support vessels. We'll take 15,000 personnel, our most experienced officers and best trained soldiers." "And you think this force can make a difference?" "Mr. President, I don't know. But I do know that humans have never backed down from a fight when innocent people needed help. The Zephyrians are our friends. They're asking for our help. We can't just ignore that." Defense Secretary Johnson tried one more time. "Sir, this could be a trap. How do we know the Zephyrians are telling the truth?" Dr. Helen Ross, Earth's top expert on alien communications, spoke up. "Mr. Secretary, I've been studying Zephyrian culture for 2 years. They don't lie. It's not part of their nature. If Ambassador Kale says they're dying, then they're dying." President Brooks stood up. Everyone in the room came to attention. "Admiral Sullivan, you have permission to organize your fleet. We're going to help our alien friends, and we're going to learn everything we can about these Devourers before they reach Earth." The room erupted in activity as officers began making phone calls and sending orders. Admiral Sullivan walked over to the President. "Sir, there's something else you need to know. The people who volunteer for this mission might not come back. The journey to Kepler takes 3 months each way. If we get into a big fight out there..." President Brooks nodded. "I understand, Admiral. But sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. Make sure everyone who volunteers knows what they're getting into." Within 6 hours of the first alien distress call, recruitment centers across Earth were flooded with volunteers. Captain Ryan Martinez, a veteran pilot, was among the first to sign up. So was Colonel Amy Rodriguez, who commanded a unit of Space Marines. Thousands of others followed. The message was simple: Earth's friends needed help, and humanity would not let them down. For the first time in human history, an interstellar military fleet was being assembled. The Devourers had made one mistake. They had threatened not just Earth, but Earth's allies. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you picked a fight with the human race. 3 months later, Captain Ryan Martinez stood on the bridge of the battleship U.S. Defiance and watched the Kepler system appear on his screens. What he saw made his stomach turn. The beautiful blue-green world that the Zephyrians called home was covered in dark smoke. Massive alien ships hung in orbit around the planet like metal vultures. "Admiral Sullivan, we're getting signals from the surface," reported Lieutenant Jenny Walsh from her communications station. "The Zephyrians are still fighting, but barely." Admiral Sullivan studied the enemy ships through her telescope. Each Devourer vessel was huge, easily the size of a small city. They were black and angular, covered with weapons and strange devices that seemed to be sucking something from the planet below. "Those must be their harvesting machines," said Dr. Ben Clark, who had come along as the fleet's science officer. "They're stripping the planet of everything they can use." Captain Martinez counted at least 20 of the giant ships. His human fleet had 37 vessels, but most of them were much smaller than the Devourer ships. This was going to be the fight of their lives. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," she announced over the fleet communications. "We didn't come this far to back down now. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Zephyrians. We're fighting For Earth too, the first battle started badly for the humans. The Devourer ships had shields that could stop most human weapons. Their own guns were powerful enough to destroy a human cruiser with just a few hits. In the first hour of fighting, Earth lost 2 ships and barely damaged 1 enemy vessel. But Captain Martinez noticed something strange. The enemy ships moved in perfect patterns. They always did exactly what military computers would predict. It was like fighting robots that could only think in straight lines. "Jenny, send a message to all our ships," he ordered. "Tell them to stop flying like we're in a parade. Start moving crazy. Do things that don't make sense." Lieutenant Walsh looked confused but followed orders. Within minutes, human ships were flying in wild, unpredictable patterns. Some ships flew upside down. Others spun in circles while shooting. Captain Dan Foster in the cruiser UE's Thunder actually flew his ship backwards through the enemy formation. The Devourers didn't know what to do. Their computer brains were designed to fight enemies who followed logical military tactics. When humans started acting crazy, the machines couldn't predict what would happen next. "It's working," shouted Lieutenant Steve Parker from the weapons station. "Their shields are opening up because they can't figure out where to protect." Down on the planet's surface, things were just as chaotic. Colonel Amy Rodriguez led the first group of human soldiers to land on the Zephyrian homeworld. What she found there broke her heart. The Zephyrians were tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large, kind eyes. They had been fighting the Devourers for months, but they fought like artists, not soldiers. Their weapons were beautiful and their tactics were elegant, but they were losing badly. "Why are you retreating?" Amy asked Commander Thane, a Zephyrian military leader, as his troops pulled back from a Devourer position. "The enemy has superior firepower at that location," Thane replied calmly. "Military doctrine says we should withdraw and find a better position." Amy looked at the enemy machines advancing toward a Zephyrian hospital. "Sometimes military doctrine is wrong," she said. She grabbed her radio and called her Marines. "This is Rodriguez. We're going to hit those machines from behind. Use the sewers, the rooftops, anywhere they won't expect us. Fight dirty." The human Marines spread out through the city like angry wolves. They hid in destroyed buildings and jumped out to attack Devourer machines with rocket launchers. They used the city's own infrastructure against the enemy, collapsing bridges and flooding tunnels to trap the machines. Sergeant Mike Collins led a squad that turned a shopping mall into a fortress. They filled it with homemade bombs and lured a group of Devourer units inside. When the machines entered the mall, the humans blew it up and buried the enemies under tons of concrete. The Zephyrians watched in amazement. They had never seen anyone fight like this. Humans didn't just follow rules. They made up new rules as they went along. "Your people fight without honor," Commander Thane told Colonel Rodriguez as they watched human soldiers ambush another Devourer. "Patrol, maybe," Amy replied, "but we win." Back in space, the tide was turning. Dr. Ben Clark had been studying the Devourer ships and made an important discovery. All the enemy vessels were connected by some kind of invisible network. They shared information instantly, which made them hard to surprise. "But that's also their weakness," he explained to Admiral Sullivan. "If we can disrupt their network, they'll be confused." Working with Zephyrian scientists, Dr. Clark developed a computer virus. It wasn't designed to destroy the Devourer network, but to confuse it. The virus would make the machines hesitate, just for a few seconds, but that might be enough. Commander Sarah Walsh volunteered to deliver the virus. She took a small, fast ship and flew it directly at the largest Devourer vessel. The enemy fired everything they had at her, but Sarah flew like a maniac, spinning and diving in ways that made no sense. She crashed her ship into the side of the enemy vessel and uploaded the virus directly into their systems. The effect was immediate. All across the battle, Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving. For the first time in their existence, the machines felt something like doubt. "All ships attack now," Admiral Sullivan ordered. The human fleet poured everything they had into the confused enemy. Without their perfect coordination, the Devourer ships were just big targets. One by one, they began to fall. On the planet, the machines had stopped advancing. Some of them just stood still, as if they didn't know what to do next. The Zephyrians and humans pressed their advantage, destroying the harvesting equipment and driving the invaders back. Lieutenant Tommy Scott, a young pilot, flew his fighter through the atmosphere and saw something amazing. Zephyrian soldiers were fighting alongside human marines, and they were learning from each other. The elegant aliens were starting to fight dirty, while the humans were learning to use Zephyrian energy weapons. "Look at that," he said to his wingman, Lieutenant Kate Murphy. "They're becoming warriors just like us." The battle for the Zephyrian homeworld lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the humans and their alien allies had won their first victory against the Devourers. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. As Captain Martinez watched the last enemy ship explode, he thought about Earth. The Devourers they had fought here were just a small part of a much larger force. The real war was still coming. But humanity had learned something important. They had discovered that they could win, even against impossible odds. They had shown the galaxy that sometimes the best way to fight smart enemies was to fight like crazy humans. The war in the Kepler system had been going on for 8 months. What started as a rescue mission had turned into the longest battle in human history. Captain Ryan Martinez stood in the damaged bridge of the UES Defiance and looked at the list of ships they had lost. 12 vessels were gone forever, along with thousands of brave souls who would never see Earth again. The worst loss had been the heavy cruiser Use Valor. Captain Dan Foster had volunteered for one impossible mission too many. When a group of Devourer ships threatened the Zephyrian moon colony of Ceres, Dan had flown his ship straight into their formation. The explosion had saved 50,000 Zephyrian civilians, but it cost Earth one of its best captains and his entire crew. "Another memorial service tonight," said Lieutenant Jenny Walsh quietly. She had been keeping track of all the friends they had lost. Captain Martinez nodded sadly. Dan knew what he was doing. He saved all those people on Ceres. But the sacrifices were having an effect that nobody expected. The Zephyrians, who had always been peaceful and gentle, were changing. They watched human soldiers fight and die to protect Zephyrian worlds, and something awakened in them. Commander Thane, the Zephyrian military leader, came to see Colonel Amy Rodriguez at her base on the planet's surface. His silver skin looked different somehow, harder than before. "I want to learn your fighting methods," he told Amy. "My people have been fighting with honor for thousands of years, but honor is not winning this war." Amy looked at the alien commander with respect. "Fighting dirty isn't about giving up honor. It's about doing whatever it takes to protect innocent people." Over the next few weeks, something amazing happened. Zephyrian soldiers started using human tactics. They learned to hide in shadows and strike from unexpected places. They began to use their environment as a weapon, turning their own cities into traps for the Devourers. The most surprising change came when the Zephyrians started making their own improvised weapons. Captain Lisa Harper watched in amazement as Zephyrian engineers turned mining equipment into giant cannons and civilian transport ships into flying bombs. "They're learning to think like us," she told Dr. Ben Clark as they observed a group of Zephyrian soldiers setting up an ambush. "They're learning that sometimes you have to break the rules to save lives." But the Devourers were learning too. The machine intelligence behind the enemy forces was adapting to human tactics. New types of Devourer units appeared on the battlefield, designed specifically to counter human unpredictability. Colonel Tim Brooks, President Brooks' younger brother, was commanding the defense of Nexus, an important Zephyrian industrial world. The planet produced much of the advanced technology that both species needed for the war. If Nexus fell, the Alliance would lose a huge advantage. The Devourers came in force. Hundreds of ships darkened the sky above Nexus, and thousands of ground. Units began landing on the planet's surface. Tim had only a few thousand human soldiers and some Zephyrian volunteers to defend an entire world. "We can't fight them straight up," Tim told his officers during an emergency meeting. "We need to get creative." The defense of Nexus became legendary. Tim's engineers turned the planet's massive factories into weapons. They reprogrammed industrial robots to attack Devourer units. They used the planet's mining tunnels to move troops underground, appearing behind enemy lines when the machines least expected it. Sergeant Mike Collins, who had survived the fighting on the Zephyrian homeworld, led a team that turned an entire city district into a giant trap. They evacuated all the civilians, then filled every building with explosives. When a large force of Devourers entered the district, Mike's team brought down every building at once, crushing hundreds of enemy machines under tons of concrete and steel. The Zephyrians fought alongside the humans with a courage that surprised everyone. Commander Thane personally led a suicide mission to destroy a Devourer command post, driving a transport ship loaded with explosives directly into the enemy position. "For our friends," he said over the radio before the explosion. Those were the last words anyone heard from the brave Zephyrian commander. The turning point came when Dr. Helen Ross, working with a team of Zephyrian computer experts, made a crucial discovery. She had been studying the wreckage of destroyed Devourer ships and found something important. "All these machines are getting their orders from somewhere else," she explained to Admiral Sullivan. "There's a main control ship hiding somewhere in this system. If we can find it and destroy it, the other Devourers will lose their coordination." The search for the control ship took weeks. Finally, Lieutenant Steve Parker, scanning the outer asteroid belt, found it. The ship was massive, even larger than the city-sized vessels they had been fighting. It was hidden among the asteroids, protected by hundreds of smaller ships. Admiral Sullivan looked at what remained of her fleet. She had started with 37 ships. Now she had only 25 vessels still able to fight, and most of those were damaged. The enemy force protecting the control ship was larger than anything they had faced before. "Ma'am," said Captain Martinez, "if we attack that position with everything we have, we might not have any ships left to get home." Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, then she smiled grimly. "Captain, we didn't come here to go home. We came here to win." The final battle of the Kepler system began at dawn. Every human ship that could still fly joined the attack, along with dozens of Zephyrian vessels. They flew straight at the asteroid field where the Devourer control ship was hiding. The fighting was horrible. Devourer ships swarmed around the human fleet like angry wasps. The U's thunder exploded when it took a direct hit from 3 enemy vessels at once. The Zephyrian cruiser Starlight sacrificed itself to save 2 human destroyers. Captain Martinez watched his friends die one by one as they fought their way toward the control ship. The U's Defiance was badly damaged, with fires burning on 3 decks and half his weapons offline. "Captain," said Lieutenant Walsh, "we're not going to make it. The ship can't take much more damage." Martinez looked at the massive enemy control ship ahead of them. Dr. Clark's final virus was loaded and ready to transmit, but they had to get close enough to upload it directly into the enemy's main computer. "Then we'll do what Dan Foster would do," Martinez said calmly. He turned to address his crew over the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for ramming speed." The U eased Defiance, its engines pushed beyond their limits, accelerated toward the heart of the Devourer control ship. Enemy fire tore through the hull, but Martinez held his course. At the last second, he transmitted Dr. Clark's virus directly into the enemy's central computer. The explosion could be seen from every planet in the system. When the light faded, the massive Devourer control ship was gone, and something amazing happened. All across the Kepler system, the remaining Devourer machines simply stopped moving. For the first time in galactic history, the machine swarm had been defeated. But the victory had cost humanity and their Zephyrian allies dearly. Of the 37 human ships that had come to Kepler, only 8 were still able to fly home. 8 months after the destruction of the Devourer control ship, the 8 surviving human vessels limped back into Earth's solar system. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship and watched her home planet grow larger. On the screen, she had left Earth with 37 ships and 15,000 people. She was returning with less than 3,000 survivors, but they brought something precious with them: knowledge and hope. President Nathan Brooks waited at the orbital station Terra Prime, where this whole adventure had started. His hair was now completely gray, and new lines marked his face. Leading humanity through its first interstellar war had aged him years in just over a year. "Welcome home, Admiral," he said when Sullivan's transport docked with the station. "The whole planet wants to hear what happened out there." Admiral Sullivan looked tired but determined. "Mr. President, we won the battle, but the war is just beginning. The Devourers we fought were only scouts. The main swarm is still coming." Dr. Ben Clark, one of the few scientists who had survived the final battle, showed the President data they had gathered from captured Devourer technology. "Sir, we estimate the main force has thousands of ships. They're maybe 18 months away from Earth." President Brooks felt his stomach drop. "How do we fight something that big?" "The same way we fought the scouts," Admiral Sullivan replied. "But this time, we won't be fighting alone." 3 days later, Ambassador Kale arrived at Earth aboard a Zephyrian diplomatic ship. The alien leader looked different from the desperate being who had first called for help. His silver skin had small scars from battle, and his large eyes held a new hardness. War had changed him, just as it had changed humanity. "People of Earth," he said in a speech broadcast to the entire planet, "you answered our call when we were dying. You sacrificed your own people to save ours. Now we stand with you as the darkness approaches." Behind Ambassador Kale came something unprecedented. A fleet of Zephyrian warships, armed with new weapons designed using both human and Zephyrian technology. These weren't the elegant, peaceful vessels of before. These were ships built for war, crewed by beings who had learned to fight like humans. But the Zephyrians weren't the only ones coming to Earth's aid. Word of humanity's victory at Kepler had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Species that had been hiding from the Devourers for decades suddenly found hope. The Corax, a race of insect-like beings from the Vega system, sent a delegation to Earth. Their leader, a creature called Speaker Zix, met with President Brooks in the White House. "Your people showed the galaxy that the Devourers can be beaten," Speaker Zix said through a translation device. "The Corax have been running from these machines for 50 years. We want to learn to fight like humans." Next came the Altarians, a race of energy beings who lived in the clouds of gas giant planets. They had advanced technology, but had never thought of using it for war. Now they wanted to join the growing alliance. General Amy Rodriguez, promoted after heroics on the Zephyrian worlds, was put in charge of training these new allies. She established training camps on Mars where different species could learn human military tactics. "The key is unpredictability," she told a group of Corax warriors who were learning urban combat. "Don't do what the enemy expects. If they think you'll go left, go right. If they think you'll retreat, attack. Always keep them guessing." The sight of alien warriors crawling through training obstacles on Mars would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. Now it was humanity's new reality. Earth had become the center of the galaxy's first united military alliance. Dr. Helen Ross worked with scientists from 6 different species to develop new weapons. Human creativity combined with alien technology produced amazing results. They created ships that could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible for Devourer computers to track. They built weapons that fired pure energy in patterns too complex for machine minds to predict. But perhaps the most important development was happening in the minds of Earth's allies. Captain Lisa Harper, now commanding one of the new hybrid warships, watched a group of Zephyrian pilots during training exercises. "Look at them," she said to Lieutenant Tommy Scott. 6 months ago, they flew in perfect formation. Now they're flying like maniacs, just like us. The transformation wasn't limited to military tactics. The various alien species were learning other human concepts too. The idea of sacrifice for others, of fighting not just for your own people, but for strangers, was spreading throughout the galaxy. When the Devourer main force finally arrived at the edge of human space, they found something they had never encountered before. Instead of a single isolated planet, they faced a united galaxy. Over 200 ships from 7 different species waited in formation around Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan, now commanding the largest fleet in galactic history, smiled as she watched the enemy approach. The Devourers had thousands of ships, just as Dr. Clark had predicted. But they were still thinking like machines, expecting logical resistance. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," she announced to the combined fleet. "Remember what we learned at Kepler. Fight smart, fight dirty, and never give up." The battle for Earth lasted 3 days. Wave after wave of Devourer ships attacked the Allied fleet, but they couldn't adapt to the chaos of 7 different species all fighting in their own unique ways. Zephyrian ships danced through space like silver birds. Corax vessels swarmed the enemy like angry insects. Altarian energy beings phased through solid matter to attack from impossible angles. And in the center of it all, human ships led the charge, their crews laughing and shouting as they flew patterns that no computer could predict. Colonel Tim Brooks, now commanding a squadron of the new hybrid fighters, led the attack that broke through the Devourer main formation. His ships dove straight down the middle of the enemy fleet, spreading chaos and confusion wherever they went. "This is for Captain Martinez," he shouted over the radio as his weapons tore through a Devourer command ship. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, representatives from 12 different species were already on their way to Earth. The galaxy had seen what could happen when different peoples worked together. The age of hiding from the Devourers was over. President Brooks, now looking older but prouder than ever, stood before the newly formed Galactic Defense Alliance. 2 years ago, we received a call for help," he said to the assembled representatives. "Today, we stand united as one galaxy, one people, ready to face any threat that comes our way." Admiral Sullivan looked out at the stars and thought about Captain Martinez and all the others who had died to make this moment possible. They had answered one call for help and discovered humanity's true purpose among the stars. Not as conquerors, but as the warriors who would stand between the darkness and the light. Earth's warriors had awakened, and they had awakened the galaxy with them.